Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am so delighted to have my guest today because it's a fellow C-Suite Network member. We're everywhere, folks. We really are everywhere. But I'm also part of an AI mastermind technology group with him. And we're learning so much, and it's so much fun. All of our February programs this year focused on AI. And we're just kind of continuing talking about that because it's what's there. So AI might creep into our conversation today. You never know. But please join me in welcoming Gary D. Rodriguez to our program today. Welcome, Gary. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you, Deb?
I'm fantastic. Fantastic. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this. So Gary D. Rodriguez is the CEO of Peopleistic USA, an associate professor at the Business Education Institute, a master trainer of Humanistic Neuro-Linguistic Psychology, an extended DISC trainer, and a Talexes facilitator. When do you sleep? Known as the people mechanic, Gary is recognized as an international expert in the science of human excellence, and he is a published author on leadership through Bloomsbury Publishing. So again, Gary, welcome.
Thank you. It's really good to be here, Deb.
Well, we're going to have such a great discussion, but I always like to ask my guests, how did you get to where you are today?
That's a long story. I will say that I had a very, very colorful life.
Okay.
And so I went through a lot of trauma as a child, which put me into drug addiction.
Okay.
And so I was very much committed to that lifestyle until, I almost died. Then I had a big wake-up call, sort of a spiritual experience happened for me. I got clean and sober in 12 hours, and life just continued to roll out. And I kept having these small miracles and working on myself because I realized, what had occurred to me in my childhood, I didn't have any control over. But as an adult, I have choice.
Right.
So I began seeking those answers to sort of repair the nervous system and build back the neuroplasticity in my brain and become a contributing member of society. So along came AIDS at that time, and it was I don't know how many people on the call are going to remember what that was, but in those
it was
days,
pretty scary back in the mid 80s.
In the early days, it was like you were diagnosed, you were a skeleton in 3 months.
Right.
Nothing you could do. No one knew what it was. And I set out on this quest because I seemed to always get involved in places where the underdog is not getting any kind of support whatsoever. No one's doing anything about it.
Especially with that community.
Oh, yeah, it was really, really difficult. So I stepped up. I started running the first AIDS educational seminars. I got down legislators from Sacramento, living in San Diego, all the immunologists from the different hospitals, people from the illicit community. We'd do these open forums for the general public, and we'd have like 800, 1,000 people show up.
Wow.
Those. When that rolled itself out, myself and about 5 other people came together and we said, okay, well, we have to do something. I don't know what we're going to do. We need to do something. So we developed a thing called the Holistic AIDS Response Program. And that was giving free services to anyone who was affected, friends and family. So that was really, really a beautiful thing from the perspective. I got my start as a coach and a facilitator of any kind of healing process by doing breath work. Rebirthing, it was called at the time. And then I taught for spiritual support, A Course in Miracles. Those are really great. And then I realized they're not enough. and I started studying how to work with the subconscious mind.
Mhm.
And since it's 90% of us
Mhm.
and only 10% at the cognitive level,
Mhm.
if people are really interested in making rapid, quick change,
Mhm.
that you work at the root cause of the maladaptive behaviors that we
Mhm.
all have,
Mhm.
that if we know how to shift it at that other 90% of us, it cuts the time like into
Mhm.
milliseconds compared to what it would take doing just cognitive talk
Mhm.
work,
Mhm.
because that doesn't necessarily change the emotional states of
Right.
deep
Yeah.
imbalance.
What caused the issue?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So as I began to start studying there, people were asking me, please teach seminars, please teach
Mhm.
seminars. So I started. My public work got very big very fast.
Mhm.
And then people from different organizations started showing up in my public seminars.
Mhm.
And from there, that's where my corporate work began.
Mhm.
So I've worked all over the world,
Mhm.
lived down in the Southern Hemisphere, down in Australia for quite some time,
Whew.
had worked in Australia for about
Mhm.
14 years, a bit in Europe, a bit in Canada, a bit in
Mhm.
Mexico. The bottom line is that there is this robust need, and has been for years and
Mhm.
years and years, to figure out why the aspect of leadership never seems to stick.
Mhm.
It's like when the trainings are being rolled out,
Mhm.
all trainings,
Mhm.
but when the trainings are being rolled out, why doesn't the culture actually change?
Mhm.
And
Right.
since I'm a published author on installing the strategies of conscious
Mhm.
capitalism into organizations,
Mhm.
which really is based on about 10 different cultural
Mhm.
competencies that have to be present in order to make a culture thrive.
Mhm.
Now, it's no small task to get these 10 cultural
Mhm.
competencies to stick.
Mhm.
The bottom line is it all begins, and I know this is going to sound so redundant, but the fish rots from the head down.
Right.
It just does.
Mhm.
So if the upper management and the C-suite
Mhm.
are not aligned,
Mhm.
and there's ripples at the
Mhm.
top, they turn into a tsunami wave at the
Mhm.
bottom.
Right.
There's fracturing between the
Mhm.
members of a misaligned team.
Mhm.
It's going to be very difficult to get the entire
Mhm.
organization on board to follow any
Mhm.
credos of behavior or cultural norms
Mhm.
or values or align behind the mission and the
Mhm.
vision of the overall organization.
Mhm.
I was talking to a customer service rep today because I was getting some insurance
Mhm.
for media insurance. And I said to her, you are one of the best customer service reps I've ever spoken to.
Wow.
And she was. And I
Mhm.
said, you do know that the company should be paying you about 10 times what you're currently making, because
Mhm.
you are the profit center
Mhm.
where the customer meets the first
Yep.
representative of a
Mhm.
organization. That's where the customer
Mhm.
understands whether the organization is functional,
Mhm.
has a great culture,
Mhm.
or is not functional and has
Mhm.
a toxic culture.
Mhm.
They get that through the tonality of voice of the
Mhm.
CSR. They get that through the
Mhm.
willingness of the CSR to actually help the
Mhm.
customer
Right.
and go that extra step.
Mhm.
She did all of that for me.
Mhm.
And I thought, I will be more inclined to do business with
Mhm.
that company
Right.
than any other insurance company
Mhm.
that I had called this morning.
Mhm.
The bottom line is that most of us do not realize that the problem isn't necessarily in the performance of the teams, because the
Mhm.
teams are really a reflection. They're modeling
Mhm.
their team leads. The
Mhm.
team leads are generally modeling middle management. Middle
Right. Mhm.
management is modeling upper management.
Mhm.
Upper management
Mhm.
is modeling the C-suite.
Mhm. Kids
So
act like their parents.
exactly. So if there is a CEO
Mhm.
who is moral, who is ethical, who
Mhm.
has deep humanity and empathy, knows their stuff, is
Mhm.
respected for the decisions that they
Mhm.
make and how they make those
Mhm.
decisions, the whole entire
Mhm.
organization falls in line.
Right.
I tell this story often. I was asked to fly down to Australia and speak at Shell Oil's International Leadership
Mm.
Conference. And so I was on stage. It was very interesting because when I sent my PowerPoint slides down to them, they did something really wacky. They took my PowerPoints and tried to fit it into their slide template.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. And so I thought my slides were great. I clicked on
Mhm.
my first slide and all the words were all
Oh
jumbled.
no.
And I looked out at the audience and I said, this is not how I sent them
Yeah.
over.
Oops. Hmm.
Oops. So, but before I got up on stage, I was waiting outside
Hmm.
at the Perth Convention Center. I was waiting outside to be, my point person was going to bring me
Hmm.
in. And this man came out and said, Mr. Rodriguez. And I said, yeah. He goes, I recognize your face. Why don't you come in and have a seat? And I'm like, no, 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 I'll wait for my point person to come out and get
Hmm.
me before I go on stage. And he said, no, 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 I insist. And he kind of drags me in and sits me down at this table. I didn't know who he was.
Right.
And then the announcer, about 15 minutes later,
Hmm.
got up and said, I'd like to introduce the CEO of Shell Oil Australia.
Oh dear.
It was the guy who came out and got me.
Mhm.
And this was the point I wanted to make by that story, is that when he got up on stage, there was an audible gasp in the room.
Mhm.
It's like people gasped in appreciation and in awe.
Mhm.
And I sat there and I thought the whole entire energy of the room
Mhm.
changed
Mhm.
into admiration and love.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, who is this guy?
Mhm.
I mean, he's doing it.
Mhm.
So I got done talking, and he got up on stage after I got done talking, put his arm around me and looked out at the audience, pointed to me, and said, this guy just presented the missing piece to leadership, to any leadership training we have ever taught at Shell Oil.
Cool.
And what I was speaking about was what I want to speak about
Mhm.
today,
Right.
is that leaders have to dive deeper.
Mhm.
At, at the Stanford University Advisory Council on Leadership, they were asked, what is the number one principle, ingredient that leaders must have
Mhm.
in order to truly lead and have it be
Mhm.
sustainable? And they unanimously voted and said it's self-awareness.
Mhm.
Now, we all think, okay, well, maybe that's a tad bit of emotional
Mhm.
intelligence. We have our EQ down. We know
Mhm.
about that. We've read about that. Okay,
Mhm.
kind of sick of hearing about it, but we know about that.
Mhm.
But what I'm speaking about, dives way,
Mhm.
way deeper.
Mhm.
And that is, what are we aware of actually? Are we aware of the effects that we have
Mhm.
on other people?
Right.
That's part of it.
Mhm.
But are we aware of the constructs of beliefs,
Mhm.
of past
Mhm.
experiences that drive oftentimes inconsistent and maladaptive behaviors
Mhm.
that cause us to be triggered emotionally,
Mhm.
but we have the mask of civility on,
Mhm.
but inside we're boiling,
Mhm.
or inside we're strategizing a counterattack.
Right. Or we're
So,
running scared
oh, we're
or
really scared. I was teaching at the university. It was Edith Cowan University in Perth, and I was hired to go into Edith Cowan University and work with some very very high level executives
Mhm.
on their teams.
Mhm.
And I looked at them after about halfway through, and I said, you all have leader shame, and they were like, they all looked at each other, and
Yeah,
they
that
said,
we go what? Mhm.
I said, what leader shame is one eye's looking forward to the possibilities, the strategies,
Mhm.
the project management,
Mhm.
all that. But the other eye's looking behind them to try
Mhm.
to figure out who knows that they don't know actually what they're
Right.
doing.
Right. The other term, imposter syndrome, right?
Right. It's
Mhm.
it's very, very
Mhm.
stress producing.
Mhm.
So as a consequence, this whole aspect of teaching people what are the
Mhm.
fundamental building
Mhm.
blocks of your fear.
Mhm.
Because if you don't
Right.
get self-aware
Mhm.
about what's stopping you, what
Mhm.
the obstacles are,
Mhm.
you don't have enough
Mhm.
awareness to be able to overcome them.
Mhm.
And one of the issues that Peter Drucker would always bring up is that what leadership actually is not being clever, it's not being smart.
Mhm.
It's actually being consistent and congruent.
Right.
And since
Even
all
if you're doing something that people aren't going to like, they'll
absolutely,
understand it.
The bottom line is you have to engender trust.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a very long time to build trust with a team and one conversation to break it.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we look at what keeps us emotionally solidified and driven and alive, it is this whole premise of that we have emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Since all of our behaviors are really driven by emotions,
Mm-hmm.
our conversations, and this is where all the subconscious work comes in, our conversations, only 7% of the meaning of our communication is actually what we say.
Mm-hmm.
38% is the tone of our voice,
Mm-hmm.
and 55% is our body language.
Right.
Now, since the subconscious mind runs the body,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot hide your actually deep-seated feelings
Mm-hmm.
in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot necessarily control your tonality of voice
Mm-hmm.
because that is also subconscious. There will
Mm-hmm.
be a pitch, there'll be a pause,
Mm-hmm.
there'll be an emphasis or a distortion on a word that will have that person go, okay, they're not in peace and there's something else going on here.
Right.
Bottom line is we cannot hide who we are on the inside.
Right.
It's being spoken in volumes by our nonverbals.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, a leader cannot afford to have miscommunication and a lack of emotional regulation. They can't
Right.
because they'll be miscommunicating everywhere. And if they're miscommunicating, the distance between what they're saying and what the rest of them is saying, like the other 73 or more than that, 93% of them is screaming out loud non-verbally. If they can't hide that, they're miscommunicating.
Right.
So what do we do? What do you look at?
Mm-hmm.
Have to start looking at this one fundamental principle. How do you create your reality? Like if I was to ask you, Deb, and this is a trick question, so I apologize in advance. I won't let you suffer too long. My question is, how do you know that you're you? Like if I had you isolated in a flotation tank and you were there for 3 months and it was lovely and you were swimming in warm, lovely liquid and you were getting all the best food you ever wanted, stuck through a little tube and you were just there in the dark, floating around, how would you know that you were you? What would you tell me?
I don't know, because it does come from the external world. A lot of your definition of you
Comes from your memories.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't have your memory, you would not know who you were.
Right.
So if we break down memories, what memories are just a sequence of pictures, of sounds, and of feelings. Those are the three primary learning channels that we're bombarded, our five senses are bombarded with on a daily basis. We encode those experiences, then our brain categorizes in a variety of different categories, but it gets locked into the nervous system. If those events are loaded with unresolved negative emotions that happen from birth on, the imprint years are birth to 7,
Right.
where we all develop that sort of foundation,
That core.
how we're going to see the world. If those are filled with traumatic or unresolved emotional states, and we have to remember when an event happens, we build constellations of beliefs.
Oh, the stories we tell.
Exactly. And those beliefs running us unconsciously are the very things that are, people will ask, I don't know why I feel this way, or I don't know where that belief came from, or I see my world in such a way that some people are seeing it hyper negative. They have these unconscious sort of reactions to, other triggers that are happening in their current reality, and they don't understand why. Those are the unconscious triggers that have to be resolved in order for an individual, especially in a leadership position, to have enough emotional regulation, alignment with their values, their mission, and their vision, and then have enough emotional regulation to engender trust in teams they lead, that the teams will model their dedication to their own awakening and leadership and emotional regulation, and take the mantle and run with it and model that for the next tier down of management.
Right. And then it just
And then
cycles down and cycles down.
If it doesn't happen there, This is why leadership trainings don't stick.
Right.
Because very few people are in the trenches,
Mhm.
in organizations going, have you really looked at what the foundation of you actually is? I
Right.
get, I get hired a lot to go in and work with the pipeline leading into the C-suite.
Okay.
The C-suite will hire me and say,
Mhm.
we have 4 or 5 people that we want to begin to
Mhm.
start training up to
Mhm.
bring them into the C-suite
Mhm.
because we are retiring out.
Mhm.
The C-suites are aging out. The boomers are starting to just go, okay, we've had
Mhm.
it. You know,
Mhm.
we
Yeah,
need
we're done.
others
Mhm.
to come in and
Mhm.
follow behind us to
Mhm.
run the organization.
Mhm.
And so they'll say to me, knowledgeable, knows the company inside,
Mhm.
but there's something missing.
Mhm.
And I'll just tell you one short case. I was working with this one company in Texas, and they had someone that they all really admired. And he was coming up into the ranks and files. He was super knowledgeable.
Mhm.
There was an edge about him that no one understood why the edge was
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
Edge in his communication, especially when he
Mhm.
wasn't seen or people felt like he has this level of insecurity that we don't
Okay.
understand.
Mhm.
And they thought that can't be there in
Mhm.
this
Right.
position, right?
Mhm.
So they hired me to come in and work with him. So what I discovered as we continued to coach, I had to do a lot of trauma work with him, and this is
Mhm.
why. What happened for him was when he was very young, his parents were so poor, they lived in literally a shack in the
Mhm.
woods.
Mhm.
No running water, no electricity.
Mhm.
He had to bathe in a stream. They had to boil their water from
Mhm.
a stream to drink.
Mhm.
He never could bathe. His
Mhm.
clothes were always filthy. He
Mhm.
stunk. And so
And so the other kids.
when he
Mhm.
got on the bus, there was just shaming and shaming
Mhm.
and shaming.
Mhm.
So then he, as an adult, carrying those deep imprints about himself
Mhm.
into the C-suite,
Mhm.
knowing everyone else in that room had
Mhm.
PhDs in their
Mhm.
field, they were highly
Mhm.
educated, they came from a completely different
Mhm.
socioeconomic background. He would walk in and feel like, I am beyond a fraud.
Mhm.
I shouldn't be here.
Mhm.
I have to speak louder to get my point across because
Mhm.
I know I'm not respected, because I'm
Mhm.
not respecting myself in this
Mhm.
particular environment.
Right. And he was waiting to be attacked.
Well, anticipating it,
Mhm.
anticipating it. So
Mhm.
whatever we focus upon, we always make stronger within ourselves.
Mhm.
And so as he kept focusing on that
Mhm.
protectiveness that he felt
Mhm.
like he needed to have,
Mhm.
that shield to never be
Mhm.
embarrassed and shamed again,
Mhm.
there would be an edge because
Mhm.
he's expecting attack. So
Right.
he would non-verbally and,
Mhm.
and tonally
Mhm.
be in
Mhm.
defensiveness
Right.
when
He
there's
might
no
attack first.
right. So there was no need for it.
Mhm.
This is what the rest of the C-suite were actually
Mhm.
sensing and feeling. So when we got done with coaching, I got a call a month later from the HR head
Mhm.
saying, Gary, I have to tell you, all the C-suite's telling me they don't even recognize him now.
Oh.
Because what happened to him in our work together, we not only neutralized
Mhm.
those limiting beliefs
Mhm.
and those deep,
Mhm.
profound emotional
Mhm.
states that he had left unresolved all his
Mhm.
life. But we realigned him to his core
Mhm.
values, his own personal mission, his own personal
Mhm.
vision, and then his vision for the
Mhm.
organization. And he was hired into the
Mhm.
C-suite as a consequence. The bottom line is if we're going to do coaching at a corporate level,
Mhm.
and not leave out, and this is why most people don't work at that
Mhm.
level, they don't know how.
Mhm.
And so from a coach perspective, executive coach
Mhm.
perspective, we have to look at it from the perspective, we have to dive deep enough to
Right.
change the core structure
Mhm.
of the filters that someone sees your world
Mhm.
through.
Mhm.
And those filters are number one, memories,
Mhm.
because from memories, constellations of beliefs
Mhm.
happen.
Right. Those stories that we tell. Mhm.
That's right. Those beliefs create the filter that someone sees the reality
Mhm.
through, which either says, yes, I can,
Mhm.
or no, I can't.
Mhm.
So the beliefs are the limitations, because if we don't believe we can do it, we will not even try.
Right. Or
We
we
will,
might try, but not enough.
we will not put
Mhm.
out the full effort that it
Mhm.
would take to be successful.
Mhm.
Because bottom line, success is not about
Mhm.
reaching a point. It's about failing and keeping going,
Right.
and failing and keeping going.
Right. You learn from that and you go, oh, okay.
That's right. So this is something that is so vitally
Mm-hmm.
important, I think, at the corporate level,
Mm-hmm.
to understand that the leadership trainings have not gone deep enough,
Mm-hmm.
because most trainers don't go there.
Right. Well, they don't want to pry. They think they shouldn't.
Well,
That's somebody's personal life, all those various things.
they have to, because
Mm-hmm.
those individuals are bringing in the culmination of everything they've experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing through those filters into the organization, projecting their unresolved issues onto the team members around them.
Right.
But here's the bottom line. You don't ever have to pry into someone's past, because everything can be done content free.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can do process that will help someone make peace with their past, and you do it content free, and you can provide them the tools to begin to self-facilitate themselves, then it's corporate appropriate, not corporate inappropriate. The bottom line is that as we begin to start progressing into a world of uncertainty, I like to say that
And it's getting more and more uncertain every minute.
yeah, the more the outside is uncertain, the more certain the inside has to
Right.
become. So for all of us, we have to start thinking, we must dive deeper. We have to have a stronger foundation of our own self-leadership and self-regulation. We also have to start training people how to work in a way that's going to uncover those things that have been blocking them, those distortions of their life, and help them realign to a much deeper purpose, an organizational purpose, a personal purpose within the organization. And then you'll have more people in the same boat rowing in the same direction.
Right.
Then you'll have work that will stick, and leadership that will impress and inspire.
Right. And I've talked to a lot of different people on the program about leadership, and one of the things, anybody can and is a leader.
Absolutely.
And it's not just the president, the CEO, the director, the whatever. I mean, you're the leader of your family. I'm the leader of my cats. Now they might not pay attention, right? But we're leaders in our churches, all of these various things. And so, all of this is just great for everybody. And I think we've seen this, I see this probably daily on Facebook, where it's a meme that somebody posts, and it says something along the lines of, be nice to someone else because you never know what they're going through. And I think that's so true. We don't know not only what they're going through now, but what they went through their entire life, and sometimes it's just one thing that sets the tone forever, depending on what it is. I mean, obviously, there are some extremely traumatic things, but it can also just be things like, little girls. I'm the end of the baby boomer generation. And so, girls my age were told, you don't do math, you don't do science, you don't do those things. Girls don't do those things. And, by teachers, parents, everybody. And I remember looking at him and going, all right. But that was because my mother was a very strong person. But yeah, all these things that we have had since, like you said, birth, that are so much a part of us, we have to recognize them. Now, we're not making them go away. That all still is there, but it's how have we resolved it and come to terms with it, as you were saying.
Well, one of the things I can almost hear people asking, okay, so I have to resolve the deeper issues in me and hunt that down. How the heck do I do that?
Right.
I like to just
it's icky. I don't want to think about it.
Right. Well, what I spent my life doing is, because I had come from such a traumatic past, I spent my life trying to figure out what causes crazy. Because I grew up with a parent that was emotionally unstable and mentally unstable. And, God bless her, but, that was just the truth.
That was her.
And it all came from the injuries that she did not have the tools to be able to resolve what happened to her. So if we all look around us and we look at, God, there's a mental health crisis that's just crazy. And it's because, of course, our therapy system has failed us.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had actually a therapy system that
Mm-hmm.
actually got results,
Right.
resolved
Mm-hmm.
people's mental
Mm-hmm.
health, the mental health crisis
Mm-hmm.
is based upon people are carrying so
Mm-hmm.
much
Mm-hmm.
brokenheartedness,
Mm-hmm.
damage, and trauma.
Right.
There's not a quick
Mm-hmm.
out there
Mm-hmm.
to help them resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
So in this process of trying to figure out how to help
Mm-hmm.
people resolve the past
Mm-hmm.
quickly during the AIDS work I did,
Mm-hmm.
I, quite by accident, discovered this process that decodes your nervous system in under 30 minutes
Ah.
from any negative memory, I'll say
Mm-hmm.
traumatic memory as
Mm-hmm.
well. The change is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
You do it content free. I don't have to know anything
Mm-hmm.
about it. And I can work with a person, and there can be an event in their life
Mm-hmm.
that happened that shattered them
Mm-hmm.
as a child,
Mm-hmm.
shattered them. They've never been the same
Mm-hmm.
since. And I can resolve it in 30
Mm-hmm.
minutes, sometimes less,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes 45
Mm-hmm.
minutes. But the bottom line is they can even be trained to self-facilitate
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
themselves. And
Right.
this
So that when they're
is
starting to go down that path, they're like, oh, mm-hmm.
well, this is where you can take the tool
Mm-hmm.
and put them in the hands
Mm-hmm.
of the people so that they can
Mm-hmm.
self-facilitate
Mm-hmm.
themselves.
Right.
Remember, I before we got on the podcast, I shared with you that testimonial that came in
Mm-hmm.
from one of
Right.
my
Mm-hmm.
jobbies, CRM, and I had a person randomly just write a notice in the
Mm-hmm.
platform about a product I put up
Mm-hmm.
on my e-learning
Mm-hmm.
platform, which is a
Mm-hmm.
self-facilitation of the memory resolution
Mm-hmm.
technique. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the one that teaches you how to self-facilitate. She
Mm-hmm.
went in, learned the process,
Mm-hmm.
self-facilitated, and she said, well, I'm going to try to paraphrase here because it was a long testimonial, but she said, I finally realized that I can handle anything when I resolve my own
Mm-hmm.
traumatic
Right.
past.
Mm-hmm.
That is the greatest insurance
Mm-hmm.
to be free in my future.
Mm-hmm.
And that is
Mm-hmm.
true because if we are carrying around the boulders of our
Mm-hmm.
past into our future, it's very difficult to run up the mountain of your
Mm-hmm.
success
Right.
carrying the boulders of your
Mm-hmm.
past on you.
Mm-hmm.
We have to retain the
Mm-hmm.
wisdom of what we've
Mm-hmm.
experienced and the learning.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have to carry the pain.
Mm-hmm.
This is a system that literally works on at the nervous system
Mm-hmm.
level, scrambles up how the traumatic event entered your nervous system
Mm-hmm.
and your sounds and feelings,
Mm-hmm.
scrambles it up, and then we re-imprint it
Mm-hmm.
with all the positive assets of your entire life
Mm-hmm.
called meta resources.
Mm-hmm.
We re-imprint it over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It takes about 30 minutes. When
Mm-hmm.
you're done, you see it generally like a black and white photo in a photo album,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't see it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Your feelings, you peace out.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very peaceful. And what
Mm-hmm.
used to cause your heart to pump
Mm-hmm.
and you to be short of breath
Mm-hmm.
ends up being a black and white photo from the past. You know
Mm-hmm.
it happened, but it has no emotional impact on
Right.
you.
Right. And like you said, it happened. And we're not saying whatever it was
Whatever it was.
did not happen, because I think that's probably one of the biggest issues that so many people have is they try to ignore that happened, and whether it was something, like a sexual assault or, something very traumatic like that, or even just, a parent, a teacher continually, saying, you're not worthy, those type of things. And we don't want to deal with them. They hurt. So we act like they didn't exist. But of course, the problem is they do. And they're that underlying level of everything that we're doing.
You see, the compartmentalization of a unpeaceful, adverse past
Mm-hmm.
is not a coping strategy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a recipe for long
Right.
suffering.
Because that wall is going to come down and wonk you.
It has to. One of the prime directives of the subconscious mind, remember, our subconscious mind is more powerful
Right.
than anything on the planet
Mhm.
as far as AI or anything.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot even figure out what it does.
Mm-hmm.
But one of its prime directives is that it surfaces unresolved emotions to the surface of consciousness when we start having the resources to deal with it.
Mm.
And so suppressed memories
Mm-hmm.
will start to rise over time
Mm-hmm.
that you can begin to resolve it,
Mm-hmm.
because suppressed memories causes harm to the physical
Mm-hmm.
body, to
Right.
the emotional body, mental
Mm-hmm.
body, and your spiritual body as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with a client recently, older man, retired. He retired expat down in Mexico with his very accomplished consultant wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she called me. She said, Gary, he can't sleep.
Oh.
He has this endless reel that
Mm-hmm.
plays in his mind
Mm-hmm.
of all of the traumas that have happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
He had it very well compartmentalized. Now he
Mm-hmm.
can't compartmentalize it
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And he is tortured. He wants to end his life. I
Oh.
know.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sat with him, I'm not going to go over all the traumas he
Mm-hmm.
had, because
There were a lot.
just to speak about them,
Mm-hmm.
you would be like, I'm traumatized just listening to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They were some of the worst ones I had ever heard, and
Mm-hmm.
yet one after another
Oh
collected.
my. Mm-hmm.
And when we got them all resolved, he started sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
A month later, we did 4 sessions together. A
Mm-hmm.
month later, his wife called me and he said, Gary, he's like a different person.
Mm-hmm.
He's no longer in pain. The
Mm-hmm.
movie reels of the
Mm-hmm.
horrors of his childhood have stopped
Mm-hmm.
completely, and he's sleeping through the night
Mm-hmm.
finally. The bottom line is your mind will not keep it suppressed.
Mm-hmm.
It will come
Because
out
it wants to heal it.
right. You see, feelings buried alive, they don't heal or go away, they
Mm-hmm.
mutate.
Mm-hmm.
And they mutate into disease,
Mm-hmm.
they mutate into maladaptive
Mm-hmm.
behaviors, they mutate into broken relationships. If we just take the idea of relationships in general,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens in most marriages is that an individual will come in already carrying all kinds of heartache and
Mm-hmm.
heartbreak around not being loved enough.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then another individual will come in to partner with that person.
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing in a whole history
Mm-hmm.
of not being loved enough.
Mm-hmm.
They combine,
Mm-hmm.
hoping and praying that the one they are partnering with is going to be the
Mm-hmm.
one that heals all the cracks in their
Mm-hmm.
broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
But when they realize their partner is flawed
Mm-hmm.
and they're both disappointing each other because they
Mm-hmm.
can't get what they need from one
Mm-hmm.
another at a deep intrinsic
Mm-hmm.
level, that's when relationships begin to turn
Mm-hmm.
toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And they fight with each other,
Mm-hmm.
they passive aggressively attack each
Mm-hmm.
other, they have affairs on each other,
Mm-hmm.
they do all of these things
Mm-hmm.
in hopes to get the attention, pay back the
Mm-hmm.
pain that that person caused
Mm-hmm.
them from the disappointment that they
Mm-hmm.
had.
Mm-hmm.
We all come into our relationships with secret contracts of expectation.
Mm-hmm.
When they don't get met, we blame the other person.
Mm-hmm.
We create drama right, left, and
Mm-hmm.
center. We want a hero, but we generally see our heroes will always turn into a villain because they never can
Mm-hmm.
fulfill the
Right. Because
lack.
our heroes are broken.
Right. They cannot fulfill the lack of our own healing inside
Mm-hmm.
of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I do couples work, because I'm teaching a relationship training soon, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
pairing it up with all of the make peace with your past work
Mm-hmm.
and the process that decodes your
Mm-hmm.
nervous system. So this is how you begin to start healing a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Sit down with yourself and begin to start
Mm-hmm.
doing this very simple
Mm-hmm.
process that starts releasing the disappointment,
Mm-hmm.
betrayals, the
Mm-hmm.
lack of love, the brokenheartedness that
Mm-hmm.
you experience even from a child into
Mm-hmm.
your young adult life and into the early betrayals of your relationship
Mm-hmm.
history. Clean up those.
Mm-hmm.
You're not bringing the pain and the anger
Mm-hmm.
and the disappointment and the
Mm-hmm.
guardedness to your current relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you'll never allow yourself to
Mm-hmm.
truly connect to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're all looking for.
Right.
We're looking for
Mm-hmm.
deep, profound connection.
Right. And it does carry over to business.
Oh
We
my
talk
God.
about our business families. One time when I was an admin assistant for this wonderful man, his wife called me his daytime wife. But yeah, we build our friendships. I mean, sometimes we're spending more time with the people we work with than we are with our family, our partners, all of those. And so, yeah, we're looking for that trust. We're looking for that understanding, all of those things. And I think that's part of the reason why work from home and I'm, is maybe not one of the best things, because when we isolate ourselves, then those little demons go, right? But yeah, it's, we want those deep relationships with, whoever.
Well, the bottom line is I've never known anyone who has a broken, toxic relationship at home who
Mhm.
comes into the workplace and doesn't transfer some of
Right.
that
Yeah.
into
Happy,
the team.
happy. Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
never known anyone.
Right. Hmm.
So the
Hmm.
bottom line is we have to start
Hmm.
really looking
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
heal
Hmm.
thyself,
Hmm.
leader,
Hmm.
lead yourself,
Hmm.
begin to start showing up in a
Hmm.
way that is going to be aligned to a much
Hmm.
truer purpose of what you're
Hmm.
really here to do.
Hmm.
And you do it in the context of your
Hmm.
organization and the people in which you have the
Hmm.
honor to
Hmm.
lead. Because
Right.
in my perspective,
Hmm.
to lead a team is to take responsibility to not only lead a team to
Hmm.
success in their job
Hmm.
roles, but to actually leave them better than what you
Hmm.
found them, and to inspire
Hmm.
them by your own
Hmm.
consistent congruent behavior
Hmm.
that creates an
Hmm.
environment of psychological
Hmm.
safety and trust for
Hmm.
them so that at least 8 hours out of
Hmm.
the day, they're not being
Hmm.
attacked, they're not feeling
Hmm.
afraid. They feel supported, they feel
Hmm.
like they can excel, and they
Hmm.
feel acknowledged, seen,
Hmm.
understood,
Hmm.
validated, and appreciated.
Right.
When we can do
Hmm.
that, we're leading well, and we'll have a
Hmm.
team that will stay
Hmm.
with us, that will perform
Hmm.
better, and that will
Hmm.
create a place where
Hmm.
people actually come to connection.
Right. And we know that when a leader is leading by fear, it
Mm,
never works. I mean, it
mm,
might work short term. You
mm.
scare somebody, they're going to do it, but then they are going to check out, literally, or, maybe they're still there and sabotaging things, whatever. I remember when they were talking about when Musk first took over Twitter and there was the big hoorah there, and he was expecting people, and we've seen this at other organizations. He expected people to sleep in the offices. Now, we've depending. I'm from Colorado. There were times where we had to do that, because we couldn't get home. But that's very different. But yeah, when people, and I think we see a lot of that now with people who are very fearful. And I've worked in organizations like that. When I worked in corporate America, we had the company I worked for was unfortunately going through multiple M&As, which then led to multiple layoffs. And so nobody knew. And the problem was our CEO didn't know. And so when you would ask him, hey, what's going on? He couldn't tell you. So then most people came up with the story, because we tell ourselves those stories, right? They came up with the story of he knows, but he can't tell us. And so therefore it's got to be bad. And then we had this really weird thing where we had the two companies that merged, they kept both CEOs. So we had co-CEOs. That was the
Oh,
most horrible. Oh, yes. Because it was like, if mom didn't answer what you wanted, you went to dad, right? Um, and that didn't last. That was just something that was horrific. And so it just but it really is something that can be fixed, right? And so I want you to tell people, how do they find you, and how, what are the services that you provide?
thanks for asking. Yes, so I have several online programs. One, of course, on the self-facilitating process.
Mhm.
I certify people in this process if they're a coach
Mhm.
or they're actually looking to help
Mhm.
family members or children,
Mhm.
even parents should know this stuff, but especially team leads.
Mhm.
So there's that on there. There's a
Mhm.
self-facilitation process.
Mhm.
There's a really great creating incredible relationships process, which
Mhm.
has a lot of work in there around
Mhm.
how do you connect, how do you
Mhm.
communicate, staying out of the drama triangle, being in
Mhm.
the creator triangle, and different subtleties about communication,
Mhm.
and especially having deep critical
Mhm.
conversation
Mhm.
strategies for that. My corporate work is very much involved in doing coaching. I always have coaching packages and whatever
Mhm.
kind of consulting work that I do.
Mhm.
I have a whole system of training self-leadership in the top tiers of organizations so that their leadership teams can dive deeper inside of themselves, create more cohesion amongst themselves, especially at the top, that will assist in the entire infusion of that self-accountability, self-responsibility in the teams that they lead and the lower levels of management below them. Super important. If we don't do it there, it generally doesn't happen. When CEOs or upper management complain about how come the leadership trainings we're investing in don't stick, I think they have to look in the mirror and realize that their behaviors are inconsistent. And so no one is believing them. And they need to be able to demonstrate it themselves before anything in lower management or team leads are ever going to follow suit. And they're the ones that impact the masses within an organization. So it begins at the top, and the top has to begin to start looking at it. Don't keep training middle management,
because it'll just keep spinning.
It just keeps spinning. Train yourselves, make a shift there. That's where it's needed. So that's my message to that. You can.
So where do they find you?
They can contact me at support@peopleistic.com.
Okay.
That is spelled PEOPLEISTIC. So people and
Istic.
That's right. It's all about people. And they can contact me there, and they can click on my website. It's just www.peopleistic.com.
And we'll have that link in the show notes.
Yep, it'll be fun.
Yep. Well, we have just scratched the surface on this. And so we definitely need to have you on again, because I think this is so important, especially with what's going on in the world. Things are just in upheaval, and they always are. But, we need to talk about how we deal with this. And so we will have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
First of all, be kind to yourself. Be very curious about yourself. Notice what emotional states you're running. Don't walk around unaware of what's driving your behaviors. Know that if you don't feel good about yourself, it's generally because you're misaligned to your top 5 values and you're doing behaviors that betray them. Understand your values are deeply unconscious. Be curious, find out what they are. Align your word, thought, and action to those 5 values, and you will get stronger.
I love it. I love it. Well, I have been having so much fun talking with Gary D. Rodriguez. I'm Deb Creer. I know. I'm Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.